nepotistic here for just 1 second, and then we'll continue to open up to my colleague, Greg.
I swear this question was not planned. Grace Carlanti, KEI. Dr. Nelson, you have mentioned the instruction sheets and also those deadlines that are centrally decided. I was wondering, since performance is assessed based on one's ability to meet these deadlines, how interested are the local farmers and the managers in adopting new ideas and innovations that is not necessarily going to help them get a better evaluation?
And again, it's a good question. The farm managers I find have a humanitarian interest in this. I'm not sure exactly where it emanates from, but most of the farms, if they can meet the quota that the government gives them, can save the rest back. And theoretically could sell part of that to buy a tractor or do something. So there's a little bit of an incentive to continue to produce. So when they estimate their yield, they're generally underestimated to the government. So they make sure that they get that.
Anybody else from KEI? Just kidding. I see Keith's hand first, and then I'll come back.
Hi, Keith Krulak from the State Department. I'd be interested if you know more about the business of the cooperative farm, how they sort of get their inputs, how they may get paid and when, and then a little more about sales or where the food goes after they produce it, and sort of big picture of the business. And one more specific thing, you showed the one slide of the rice, I believe, being threshed. Do you know anything about how it's stored and storage techniques of that? If you could explain. Thank you.
Those are good questions, and unfortunately I do not have a very good answer on that. I know that the government pays a certain price, and it's pre-established in some manner, and they come and collect the rice, and they weigh it to make sure they get the prices they're supposed to get. How that is marketed, or what is residual and how it's marketed, I can't really answer that question, unfortunately. Sorry about that. So, can't really, I know a little bit about economics, but not the checkbook. That's about it.
Thank you. Judy from Treasury. My question is whether they're dependent on any imported goods to continue the agricultural production. You said earlier on the rice varieties that they would get them from China, but then it's hard to produce seed, so do they still have to continue importing that seed from China in order to continue their rice production? And a related question is, do they get any materials from central government to these farms?
Let's go back to the first question. First, in the seed supply, the Chinese rice varieties that they're very much involved with are hybrids. And the way that the seed is produced is you have to plant the male plants and the female plants next to each other. Then every day or twice a day you go out with a long bamboo stick, one on each side, and man on each end, and they shake the thing together. And you get the cross-pollination. Now that's the way it's done. But to get them trained so that they do all of that during the period of time when the anthers are receptive or producing pollen, crystals are receptive to the challenge. And it takes a special. Now some of the German people are trying to teach them how to do this, but to get that technology down is really quite difficult. And particularly when the people aren't trained in biology in order to understand what's happening. And that's where this research emphasis comes in. So that's a real challenge. Second question, my memory was shorter than I thought. Central government, yes.
Do they get any inputs from central government?
I think on the farms, when you talk to them, they don't even know that the central government's importing a lot. I don't know whether they really know that. Their bottom line when you talk to them is, we know that we're in short food supply, and we're doing our best, and they did propaganda, but our government is doing its best. And really, I think that's the closest they come.
Yes,
Thanks. Jerry, that was terrific. I'm so sorry that I arrived a little late, so you might have covered this in the beginning. The first part of my question is just an update on humanitarian conditions. What was the sense you got when you were last there about the last harvest, about need? When would you anticipate need for food becoming acute in 2010? And then the second question is to turn over to you a question that I get a lot, and it's the kind of work that you've been doing, which is working with the individual farms to increase their productivity using innovative, sustainable technologies. The question I get is, what's the best way to help the North Korean people get more food? Is it to actually deliver humanitarian assistance like grains and soy blend and so on and so forth? Or would it be more efficient and less divertible to contribute fertilizer?
And again, it's a very interesting two questions. The rice yields, I did not get the final figure in 2009, but the conditions were not as good. And I'm not sure that it's going to last as long as they would normally expected. And there's no question there's going to be a shortage. I don't think that's the question.
Not as good in 2009 as 2008?
Yeah. 2009 was not as good, and particularly with corn as well, which makes it a problem. Now, I don't know the exact figures yet. And the other is on food or fertilizer. That's an interesting question, but frankly, I think it would be much better to get the fertilizer than to grow the food. I think the food aid is kind of a, psychologically it's different. We're going to help you grow your food rather than doing it for you. And that's only my perception on it, to be honest with you. And it is probably a lot more cost effective as far as that goes. And it gets more humanitarian. I just felt for those poor people out there picking up those corn stalks and grinding them all day long, and then mixing the manure with them and hauling it back out there again. Wow.
Thank you.
Yes. What sort of advice did you offer to the North Koreans when you were there in production and cropping? And what future cooperation plans do you have with the North Koreans?
It's very difficult to tell them what to do in the first place. And the second, and one of the reasons is that it's hard to understand all the constraints. As I mentioned earlier in a way, the economic constraints I don't understand very well. I can understand the production constraints. One of the things, though, we were interested in was doing something about chopping up all the corn stalks. And there are some implements that could be pulled by an oxen that would cut those corn stalks in the field. And whether they could be cut and mixed enough to the soil so the normal microorganisms would break them down. But the problem is it would take about a 2-year breakdown, and then those nutrients wouldn't be available the next year, so the yield would be down. It goes back to the question raised before, if we could fertilize that and bridge that for a year or two. But once it got into that, it would be a steady state. The other thing is growing more legumes. Now, they don't grow a lot of soybean yet or legumes, but they could. Now, if the rice varieties were shorter in maturity, and I've asked them about selecting some short maturity ones, there are some legumes that would be able to be grown in the fall, perhaps even planted to seed before the rice is harvested. They would grow during the fall and winter and fix nitrogen over winter and in the spring, and that would provide a nitrogen. And whether or not a short maturing variety with nitrogen from the legumes would be better than the late maturing variety with very low nitrogen is a question. I think it would be better, but I don't know for sure if they can actually do it. Those would be the sorts of recommendations we're getting. The other one that comes back in terms of the manure handling, there's a lot of the nitrogen that's lost is ammonia, and we can reduce that by harvesting manure more frequently, covering it in ways to capture the ammonia. About 30% of the nitrogen is lost by ammonia in the process that they're using. So there'd be some way of doing it. Second question was, future cooperation plans. We were working with the Academy of Agricultural Sciences, and one of the things that we're interested in is doing training of their scientists. Now, that could be short-term training for, say, 3 weeks, and that's one of the hopes for this summer, particularly beginning with soil scientists. And then we also are interested in working with them on some of their plant breeding through a cooperative effort in Vietnam, so that they would be able to grow their